Hi, this is Head On, and I'm Brian Anderson. And tonight my guests are Laura Tait, the Director of Instruction with School District 68, our local school district, and the President of the Nanaimo District Teachers Association, Mike Ball. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, I understand that there's a bit of a change coming to do with the curriculum or how kids are graded in the K to grade 9 area. And so could you tell me something about that?
You bet. So we're seeing a lot of changes actually in the public school system. That we have a redesigned curriculum, K to 9 and 10 through 12. Some pretty significant changes in the curriculum. The K to 9 curriculum has been put in place this year. All gears moving ahead. The 10 through 12 curriculum is in place in draft form right now. So teachers are investigating, giving feedback back to the ministry. And along with those changes, of course, when we change the curriculum, assessment and reporting has to follow along. So we have some significant changes in those areas as well.
So is that something the school district or the Teachers Association is supportive of, or?
Yes, teachers were involved in redesigning the curriculum. The curriculum design teams were appointed by the BCTF. There were over 100 teachers from around the province who were involved in that redesign within the ministry's parameters. The assessment process is new this year, the change in assessment process.
So it wasn't totally top-down then?
Not completely.
Okay. So does this mean that the report cards that kids get will change? Is this going to affect parents and grandparents and how they view their kids?
Absolutely. Report cards will change. They have changed here in Nanaimo Ladysmith to better align with the curriculum and with some of the reporting changes. If I may, I'll just sort of outline a couple of the major shifts in the curriculum, which will help inform some of the changes that are happening in assessment and reporting. So one of the first pieces, and jump in anytime, Mike, and help me out. Traditionally, we've had curriculum that is, dare I say, content focused, pretty content heavy, more content, topics to cover. So you'd often have a litany of learning outcomes that had to be covered in a year, and it could be overwhelming. And so this redesigned curriculum has less of a focus on that content. So they've pulled back a bit on the content, a little bit less content for teachers to try and manage. And the movement is more toward when we work with kids and we address this content and we're teaching and we're learning, we're taking that learning and now applying it to real life situations. So that doing of the learning, that application of that knowledge is more of a focus as well. How kids learn, how the brain, we know so much more these days around how the brain works and how people learn. That's another, so if we could think about the curriculum, lessening the amount of content that we're trying to cover, slowing down a little bit and going deeper with what we do want to teach and learn.
So more practical applications?
Exactly, more practical applications, and allowing for more flexibility with teachers' passions, kids' passions and interests, and being able to go deeper with some of those pieces. Literacy and numeracy remain foundational. Those still remain strong in the curriculum. The Aboriginal understandings is a piece that we're seeing, I think, in this curriculum like never before in this province, I think, or even in this country. Yeah. We're seeing way more of the Aboriginal pieces, perspectives, woven throughout the curriculum K to 12, which we've never seen this before like this. It's sort of been more grade specific, I guess. And certainly everybody is appreciative of that. Myself as an Aboriginal person, having children in this system, I feel really, really good about that, and it's a really positive direction. So we're seeing that's a significant shift that I'm feeling really positive about.
Some of the fears I think some people have when they see this kind of change, they worry that the basic skills will be forgotten, and that's not the case. You still need the basic math skills, numeracy, you need the basic literacy skills, the reading and comprehension and writing skills. Those won't change. Just how they're delivered may change. The rate at which they're delivered may change. But we still need to produce graduates who are literate, who are numerate, and who are able to be prepared when they're going into university or into the trades.
I think as well, another really major component that has big impacts on reporting is the curriculum has included what they're calling core competencies, which are I think they're calling them 21st century skills, those skills that employers are looking for, things like communication skills, thinking skills, whether it be creative thinking or problem solving or critical thinking, and continue with that personal and social responsibility. Those have been, I believe, taught by our teachers for forever. You have to, if you're teaching 30 kids in a room, we have to teach kids how to work together and how to problem solve or resolve conflicts and kindness and all of those things. But I think the curriculum is acknowledging that work that's been going on for years and years in a more formalized manner. And to add to that, they are requiring now for students to self-assess and self-report on those core competencies, which is a new piece for everyone. The core competencies, formalizing those core competencies are new. And teaching kids how to assess their own learning and then report on their own learning is brand new for many of us.
It's new in the curriculum. It's been done. All of these things have been done over the years by many, many teachers for decades. It's just more formalized now that this is the process that they would like to see followed. Still gives teachers autonomy to be able to deliver the curriculum in the way they see best, and in the best way that those students need the curriculum delivered to them. So it's what's old is new again, and what's new is old. These things are very cyclic. I think what we've seen in the past, sometimes things get thrown out. Everything gets thrown out with the change. I think the recognition this time is let's keep what's working and adapt and change as we see fit.
It's interesting because it takes me back to a quote. Einstein said something about knowledge was less important than imagination.
Exactly.
So I think what he was getting at there was, and he was a really disorganized person, like worked in a mess.
Right.
But very creative, and that's where his inspiration came from, thinking about things.
Absolutely.
So it wouldn't necessarily mean that kids are not getting A's or B's, or they're going to their teacher trying to justify an A or a B. Hey, I gave myself a B. How do you avoid those conflicts?
Well, first of all, in the K to 9, certainly in K to 3, we haven't had grades, I think since forever. 4 to 7 has had grades, and that's what's being removed now. And in 8 to 9, that's in process of being removed. Grades was something that both the BCTF and the NDTA have long said these are unnecessary. You're really ranking students. To give a student an A or a B or a C for their work is not as meaningful as giving them feedback on how they're doing, on how they've progressed, how they've improved, and areas to improve in. Much more important than a grade. For a report card to come home with a list of grades on it, the first thing students will do is they'll look over at their colleague and see how their grades are, and they'll compare themselves to somebody else. And that's not what we want. What we want is, we want students to recognize that they've seen some growth. And where do they start? Where are they now? That's way more important, I think.
And in a nutshell, Mike has synthesized the entire reporting movement. So essentially, we are looking at less of a focus on a summative grade that becomes obsolete essentially the moment you give it to that child, and focusing more, and we know, teachers know, that it's the descriptive feedback that supports the growth. Letter grades do not support growth. In fact, we'll often see that a letter grade will stop the learning. When a student sees a letter grade, they're not going to read the descriptive feedback. They become extrinsically or externally motivated by that grade.
I guess in the system that I went through, we had the grades, and yes, that was always the important thing you looked at. But I like the objective comments as opposed to the subjective comments, but then could do better. I mean, what does that mean?
Right, exactly. That's not very descriptive.
Yeah, so I was always challenged anyway. But
Well, I think that the comments for students, when you're asking, is this your best work? Is this, did you do this to the best of your ability? that was kind of the basic questions in the past. Now it's a case of, what did you do well? What could you improve on? What areas do you think you might want to stretch yourself and try and improve? So the questions that we're asking students are changing, and I think that's the self-assessment piece that we're looking at.
And I think I'll jump back to a comment you made earlier about life skills and employment, because I think when employers look at people coming into the workforce, they're trying to find somebody that fits in as opposed to somebody that fits out. And they're looking more, I think, for skill sets or attitude than, say, specific knowledge, because you can train people, but if their attitude sucks, you got a real problem.
Exactly. I mean, we've been speaking with students. You know, I'll ask that question. If I asked you to tell me what the parts of a cell were and what the functions of each of those parts were, what would you do? And they pull out their phone from their pocket and say, I would look it up on the internet. So that access to information, as we know, is huge. It's everywhere. It's all the time. And so our education system, which years ago was based primarily on that transfer of knowledge, that information, it's becoming itself obsolete. So we need to shift and change. So if we have access to that information in our workplace, what are the other skills that we need to be concerned about, right?
Actually, that's interesting, because I can't remember where I read it, but there was they were talking about the amount of available information, that it had doubled from 1960s to the 1970s, but it seems to be quadrupling or just moving on exponentially.
Absolutely.
Well, for our students, when Google became a verb, as opposed to going on to Google, their world changed. The world that they know. You know, you told the story about Einstein when Henry Ford was having his competency hearing in front of a judge, and the judge asked him who the president was. He says, I don't know. I have people who can tell me.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. So, but there's also been some criticism that this technology or connection, or like everybody's on a phone as opposed to actually having a conversation, maybe. So are we
You mean as opposed to holding a newspaper in front of us and being as unsocial?
I guess that's a good point, but so you could compare one to the other, but
you know, you think about the skills that are involved in when you access that information, being critical when you look at that information. What is the source? Where is it coming from? Is there a slant to this? How am I going to use that to inform my inquiry? So all of those pieces, I think, and then looking at technology as a way of leveraging learning, right? Mm-hmm. That it's there in the class as long as it promotes learning, promotes relationship, promotes communication, promotes all of those things. It shouldn't detract from relationship or communication or the learning. It should leverage it or support it. And that's why we need to embrace it. Us as our digital immigrants, we need to embrace it.
Some of the latest research still shows that handwritten notes will be absorbed by the brain a lot better than just taking a picture or getting a handout, because we often see kids taking a photograph of the whiteboard because they've got everything on there. We know that if they write the information down, they'll retain way more of it. If you sit there and you have to teach that to another student, you'll retain even more of it. So using the information is critical, not just seeing it.
I hate to agree with you, but I mean, that works for me because I'm a visual person.
It works for students.
And it works for students?
Yes.
But isn't it also true, like there's a study in Illinois that says like good students will get good grades no matter what school they're in, whether they're in a good school or what's considered a poor school.
Right.
What's a good grade?
Well, okay, then do well.
Right. Mm-hmm. So we needed to find ways to make sure that all students were engaged. Mm-hmm. And I would argue that grades cause students to become disengaged, because that student who has never seen better than a C throughout their entire schooling when they've had grades becomes detached from their learning. They have never seemed to be able to progress past that point.
And they become that label.
Yeah.
They become a C.
A C student.
Okay, I'll throw another label out to you. C's get degrees. So No, but sometimes the C student is somebody that maybe isn't challenged or challenged enough, or just somebody that's doing enough work to get by, which probably is a good efficiency rating, but maybe not as effective as we might like.
So I think some of the new curriculum is intended to engage those students that were having difficulty in the past, the one who might ask, when am I ever going to use this? For an algebra lesson or something like that. If they are learning things that they are interested in, but also being challenged to learn new things, and you're teaching those concepts as part of that process, I think those students will become more engaged. I think we'll have students who are able to progress at a better pace throughout their schooling.
And I believe the redesigned curriculum gives teachers maybe a little bit more, I'm hopeful that it gives teachers a little bit more flexibility so that we can slow down, as I said earlier, slow the pace down a little bit, and learn some ways to allow students to pursue what interests them, to increase the engagement so that we're not hovering at a C, as you say, their C's get degrees, that we want every kid to be metacognitive or to be able to be engaged in their learning, know why they're learning what they're learning. They're able to be passionate about that. They're directing the directions they want to go in. I think that this new curriculum, I'm hopeful that the new curriculum is take a little bit of the pressure off so that we can allow people to pursue different interests. We're not so worried about covering huge content.
Because 30 kids in a class, and not all of them are necessarily going to be tied to one point. You know, sometimes you have to approach it from different interests, different perspectives.
And if they're setting their own goals, if they're looking at what they're about, where their learning is, and then they're going to set their own goals moving forward, we need them to be able to self-assess and be able to do that. And a teacher's going to have 30 kids in a class or 24 kids in a class, and they might all have 24 different goals. And the teacher's having to manage all of that and figure that out and support them to move forward.
So how would a teacher manage somebody that's, say, very low goal-oriented and try and get them to bring that up?
Just find more and more different ways to approach things. Find what interests them. Sometimes you'll find students who really aren't that interested in reading, so it means finding a series of books or some strategies that will help them find something that does interest them. It's an art, teaching, as opposed to just a science. There's a lot of art of teaching in there, and
Absolutely.
Engaging students is one of the biggest challenges.
Well, I think what remains the same, and probably why most teachers got into the profession, is the relationship. Building relationships with these kids, getting to know them. When you build a relationship, they know you care. You can find out what does interest them or what makes them tick, and then you can allow them opportunities, right, to pursue that. And as Mike's saying, if we can try as best as we can to provide as many opportunities for the kids to get into our content, and then allow them as many ways as we can to show us what they know, that's going to engage and scoop up a lot more kids than having a one-stop shop or a one-size-fits-all sort of approach.
Okay, so that's definitely sounds like an improvement.
Yeah.
Have the kids had any sort of feedback or provided any feedback in how this is working or going? Or
We've had a couple of student forums where we've heard from students from grades 7 through 12, and you know, their responses have been very similar to other demographics, very similar to teachers, very similar to parents. Lots of kids are really motivated by grades, right? They're not really understanding why these grades are going away. I had one student say at one of the forums that a letter grade may tell me or may tell what I know, but it doesn't show how I learn. So they're starting to make these distinctions. A lot of, some of the kids have said it's taken a lot of pressure off, and it's the right direction, knowing that I don't have to worry about some of those pieces, that we're not looking to see what the other student, we're not comparing our achievement in that regard, and that it's more descriptive based on where I'm at right now and my growth moving forward. Not an arbitrary standard start line and then an arbitrary standard as a finish line.
okay, so and people could progress. Now, Mike, you mentioned earlier, like the difference between academic and technical. And I think that's always been I mean, when I went through school, it was everybody was expected to move on to university. So it was very structured that way as opposed to giving people an opportunity. So has that changed quite a bit, or?
I don't think so. I mean, you try not to close doors. You try and keep doors open as long as possible for all students, and giving them as many different opportunities for elective courses that they might be interested in, and later in secondary is important, because they'll find a passion in there. They'll find something they're interested in. Some students will head towards the trades as opposed to heading to university, and that's natural. But I think we definitely have to give them options and try and keep them interested, and maybe challenge them with something that they hadn't thought about. And that's why the grad program needs to be broad, have broad opportunities for all students.
I agree, and less of a sorting mechanism for university bound or not, because the percentage of students that actually go straight to university is quite small in proportion to the number of kids we have, and we need to provide them options. And I think the profile of trades has changed significantly, I think, in the last 5 to 10 years, right? It's being held up to higher regard, as it should be. And we're attempting to give kids more options, as Mike's saying, kind of keep it more broad and more open, and focus on the learning while we're here versus a sorting mechanism in preparation for university solely.
Well, I didn't want to get into that discussion about trades versus university from an economic perspective, because, I mean, some people think that they're way ahead of the game by getting into trade and not having to carry the debt load of university. But anyway, I digress. So now I've lost my point.
That's
so
okay.
The next thing, I guess, is where do they go from there? But it just keeps the options open?
I think it keeps the options open as well. We're acknowledging, and I can't help but say this again, but those core competencies, those interpersonal and intrapersonal skills, all of those skills that really move us ahead in life, that allow students to reflect and to know themselves, to know which direction they want to go in. And if we can arm them with that, arm them with options, and arm them with this self-reflection, they're going to be great. They're going to be great when they move on. We don't need to prepare them down a preconceived path that we decide ahead of time.
Now, I know that there's one success story. I think it's a success story, in that my understanding is that John Barsby has had a very good success ratio with First Nation students. Could you tell me anything about that?
I think overarchingly, our school district has our Aboriginal grad rates, or our completion rates, have been on the rise. This past 2 years have been our highest grad rates ever in our history, and that's really, really positive. John Barsby, like all of our secondaries actually, but John Barsby is a school that has just a wonderful, welcoming environment, a strong sense of belonging for all students, but in particular our Aboriginal students. They have a strong sense of collective ownership, and what I mean by that is the Aboriginal students are not the responsibility of the Aboriginal staff, right? It's something that all members of that staff are on board with, sort of take ownership over, and that's a huge piece. I mean, I think that's really the piece that's holding our society back and actually making some larger leaps and bounds. And we've got really good involvement at John Barsby with our Aboriginal communities, and most specifically our Nanaimo First Nation involvement there. So.
I know they got a fantastic football team, so I have to get a plug in for Rob Stevenson, because he was great with our son. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Well, and Russ Dewar in the music program, I'm amazed sometimes the amount of time they put in.
Yeah.
So
they have a fabulous theatre program, and their academics is just as good. So it's a well-rounded school with some fabulous teachers.
So extracurricular activities are still going to be high on the school's list or the curriculum?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are still many challenges with the curriculum and with the changing in reporting. The ministry came out very late with the reporting order, which put the district into a difficult position with it coming out in August, and having that change so quickly. And we're still not seeing all of the resources that are needed from the ministry to make sure the curriculum can be dealt with appropriately. The 10 to 12 is still in draft format, and they're still waiting for that to come off and see actually what they are going to deliver next year. So there's still many challenges for teachers, and there's a lot of work being done by teachers in the system to try and make things work, and in spite of some of the lack of ministry help.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot right now for everyone, particularly teachers. To navigate your way through a new curriculum is huge. It's redefining almost everything that you do in many cases. And then to in the same year, to also renegotiate your view on assessment and reporting with some strong mandates in place that, some must-dos as well on top of that. It's overwhelming. It's really overwhelming. So we're doing our very best, working together just to try to ensure folks that we're going to try and slow it down and be as supportive as we possibly can, because it's a lot, right? And so when someone, is coaching my daughter this weekend at a volleyball tournament, right? Her teacher, I'm extremely grateful that with all that going on, he's still out there, coaching her all weekend.
Well, we're winding down, so I didn't tell you at the beginning, but I do have detention if you didn't come well prepared.
Okay.
But I think you both passed, so I'll give you a passing grade on that. But,
Yeah, exactly. What did you get?
but in the history or in thinking about that, it's I guess we should just defer. Maybe you grade yourself. Mm-hmm. But
Good choice.
Anyway, thank you for coming, and Mike and Laura. It's been interesting, and appreciate your comments on the school district and this whole system of reporting. So
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
thank you. So,